Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today on The Explainer, we're stepping back in time to an era that is just completely embedded in our collective imagination. Right off the bat, I want you to picture something with me. Close your eyes and imagine this thick volumetric fog rolling in. You can see drifting dust catching that golden morning sun, and a sweeping camera movement is taking us across an untouched, vast wilderness filled with winding rivers and dense, heavy forests. Well, today we're exploring the absolutely fascinating documentary planned for Shadows of the Frontier, Dismantling the Wild West Myth. Okay, let's dive into this. When we picture the American frontier at sunrise, we always see those endless prairies and the towering peaks of the Rocky Mountains, right? It's a breathtaking landscape that practically begs to be explored. But to truly understand the West, we have to completely strip away the Hollywood fiction. We've got to toss out the exaggerated shootouts, the cartoonish caricatures, and all those trademarked symbols, and instead look at the raw, historically grounded reality that actually shaped the nation. And to guide us through this real history, we're going to use this really cool imagery of glowing, animated parchment maps.
So, think of this agenda as our animated parchment map for the day. We'll be covering setting a cinematic frontier scene, migration and Native American nations, boomtowns and the open range, iron horses and frontier law, and finally, the true Wild West legacy.
All right, Section 1, Setting a Cinematic Frontier Scene. Let's talk about the visual rules that make this feel so real.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how uncompromising the source material is about authenticity. To capture the true history, it mandates ultra-realistic 4K UHD at that classic 24 frames per second cinematic look. It demands entirely natural lighting. Think dramatic golden hour sunlight and flickering natural campfires. Plus, the textures are so detailed you can practically feel the rough wood, the worn leather, and the cold stone. And obviously, it strictly forbids modern roads and power lines, so no way are you going to see an accidental modern coffee cup left in these shots. These specific rules guarantee a premium, accurate foundation for the whole story.
Moving on to Section 2, Migration and Native American Nations. Let's unfurl that map and head west. Picture the sheer grid of this. Entire families traveling in these incredibly heavy, wooden-covered wagons pulled by slow-moving oxen just pushing westward across the Great Plains. It was all about immense endurance and basic survival. These pioneers relied heavily on horseback scouts to navigate some seriously difficult terrain, using basic survival tools and setting up authentic frontier camps with roaring fires and cast-iron cooking gear every single night. But, and this is a huge but, it is absolutely essential to remember that this massive migration didn't just happen in an empty, vacant land. They were pushing directly into territories already inhabited by deeply established cultures.
And the source is deeply committed to historically respectful and accurate portrayals of those Native American communities, showing their daily lives both before and during this westward expansion. There was just incredible diversity across these nations. For example, on the plains, you have cultures centered around traditional teepees, highly intricate buffalo hunting techniques, and a truly incredible horseback culture. Contrast that with the Southwest, where you see this brilliant Pueblo architecture and long-established settlements. It's crucial for us to recognize how diverse and thriving these nations were, and to understand the real, growing tensions that arose as expanding settlements encroached on them.
Okay, Section 3, Boomtowns and the Open Range. This is where we look at the economic engines of the frontier. A boomtown was a bustling mining settlement characterized by wooden storefronts, busy dirt streets, saloons, blacksmiths, and miners using sluice boxes and pickaxes. But forget the goofy movie caricatures. During the gold rush, these boomtowns exploded literally overnight. They were serious, rapid-growth settlements packed with rough 19th century architecture and hardworking miners. Picture them bathed in warm sunset lighting, with floating dust particles hanging in the air over busy dirt streets. They were absolutely packed with horse-drawn wagons and people desperate for a new start.
And this brilliantly illustrates the other half of that frontier economy, the open range. We are talking authentic, totally grueling cattle drives across endless plains. The Cowboys wore historically accurate clothing, rode in authentic saddles, used branding irons, and relied entirely on chuck wagons for their survival. The scale of this is just breathtaking. Imagine trying to guide thousands of cattle over rushing rivers and massive grasslands, all while navigating dramatic thunderstorms in the distance and kicking up these thick, realistic dust clouds that swept across the whole horizon.
Now, to really grasp how insanely fast things changed on the frontier, let's walk through this timeline. It acts as a perfect chronological bridge. In the 1840s, we start with the slow, grueling pace of covered wagons. Then, bam! By the 1850s, the gold rush introduces sluice boxes and intensive mining equipment. The 1860s bring the massive logistics of open-range cattle drives. And then, just a decade later in the 1870s, everything rapidly accelerates with the arrival of powerful steam locomotives on steel rails. It completely transformed in just a few short decades. Which brings us to Section 4, Iron Horses and Frontier Law. Constructing the Transcontinental Railroad was an absolutely monumental feat of engineering. Step 1 was the back-breaking work of laying steel rails across unforgiving mountains, deserts, and wide valleys. Step 2 saw these pathways crossing massive wooden bridges and carving through dark mountain tunnels. And Step 3 was the ultimate result, dramatically expanding the nation's transportation network. I mean, imagine the sparks flying, the thick smoke billowing, and the hissing steam as these iron horses literally stitched the expanding nation together.
So, the crucial point is, how did this rapidly expanding society actually manage itself? Hollywood loves to sell us these exaggerated myths of glamorized violence and endless street shootouts, right? Total lawlessness. But documented history tells a completely different story. Real frontier justice was about maintaining order. It was about establishing courts, electing sheriffs and marshals, building jails, and creating lawful institutions to handle disputes. They were focused on building functional, orderly communities, firmly debunking those popular, romanticized tales of constant violence.
And finally, Section 5, the true Wild West legacy. Let's see what remains as our map starts to fade.
So what's actually left of the frontier today? Well, we have beautifully preserved ghost towns that were once just booming with miners. We have historic ranches still standing out on the plains, and countless museums and monuments protecting the artifacts. Picture a sweeping sunset over the natural desert scenery. These historical remnants aren't just old buildings. They are a vital window into our shared growth and the massive expansion of the United States, connecting the past to our present.
As the documentary plan beautifully puts it in its closing title card, the Wild West helped shape the United States, but its true story is far more complex than the legends. That quote is just so powerful, you know? It reminds us that the authentic history we've explored today, the genuine struggles, the diverse cultures, the technological leaps, and the pursuit of real law is infinitely richer and more fascinating than any work of fiction.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. How does the complex, documented history of the frontier still shape the modern American landscape today, far beyond the Hollywood myths? Think about our transportation networks, our legal institutions, and our incredible cultural diversity. Thank you so much for joining me today, focused learners. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and always remember to look past the legends. See you next time.